All right, so I just need to make sure that everything is working here because for whatever reason, it's not showing the stream in high def for me. So let me just check out that and make sure it is showing up properly on your end. Okay, so it is when you actually view the stream. It just seems to not want to work on my end. All right, so that should be all right. Just do a quick audio check here. Okay, so it is when you actually view the stream. It just seems to not want. Okay, perfect. I haven't streamed in a while, so it's a little bit of work to set up. It says that my FPS rate is too high. I've never seen that one before. To set it to 30 FPS or less. I don't actually know how to do that in the software. I'm just gonna. All right, so it's reconnecting. Should pop up here in a second. Going to do one more audio test just to make sure everything is good. It's reconnecting. Should pop up here in a. All right, yep, audio's good. No more warning about too much FPS. I have never seen that one before. I didn't know you could have too much FPS. But all right. So today I'm doing a live QA / stream of FishNet development. In other words, you can ask questions if you have any questions. As far as help questions, primarily we'd prefer you to keep those to our other platforms. I might take a few help questions if they're, exceptionally unusual. But mostly development questions, things of that sort, what's planned for the future, etc., and whatnot. So the reason I'm doing this stream is just because why not, really? It's been a while since I've done a stream, and also the next version of FishNet 4 is coming out really soon here. Right now we're doing some tests with the prediction version 2, and all reports have been solid as of the latest pre-release, which is currently only available to supporters, but it's not like any limitation to free users other than we want to control how many people are testing it just because we don't want to be spammed with a bunch of questions and whatnot in the same bug report. So it's just a controlled testing pool, make things a little bit easier for us. Oh, there's a big crow outside my window staring at me right now. That's not weird. Okay. All right, so let's see. Right now, as I said, it's pretty much done. There's a few things I just want to look at first, or add even. So the only report we've had on it so far is that sometimes when you first connect, there is a large lag spike. We actually had this issue in version 1 too at some point. So I think it's probably, if I haven't had a chance to ask them about this or look into it, but it's probably the same thing that has happened before. And that was ultimately is that they're getting a state update for a really old state because they're just connecting. Maybe their connection was, maybe the scene was taking a while to load or whatever. And let's say the state was 3 seconds back or whatever it might have been. That means it's going to replay all the takes since that, and they're essentially simulating 3 seconds worth of physics and all that stuff in one frame. So that could be what's causing it. So I'm just going to add a quick check for that just to make sure. So to do that, I'm going to go up here. Oh, I actually already have a check for that. Um, I guess I thought I had it in this one. So it could still be the same problem. I don't know. Let me just read this here. If a client has a massive ping or is suffering from a low frame rate, this is why you add notes. This is always beneficial, even if it's your own project. Then limit the number of reconciles to prevent further performance loss. Okay, so if time pass has been 3 seconds, basically saying if it's been 3 seconds since state's been run, or if a time manager has detected a low frame rate. So 3 seconds is probably way too long. It's not going to take 3 seconds to... I probably bumped this up for testing purposes. More than a second is honestly excessive. But while testing, I think I'll keep it at 1.5. Yeah, Heaton, talking to Ken here on chat, Heaton is actually... I'm sure it's other frameworks, but Heaton has been the most user-friendly for us, and that's why we usually recommend them. Their pricing plan is also extremely fair, and they have a free version as well. So we really like to recommend Heathen Engineering or Heathen Steamworks just because of that. It's a really good entry product for commercial and people that are just trying, want to check it out. So this is all set. So I'm actually going to ignore that. But if you're curious what this code does, this is basically saying limit 3 drops per second. Drop value will be roughly the same as every 330 milliseconds. So this is saying if we've dropped more than this number of reconciles, then we're not going to drop any. Just because it's already, you don't want to drop every single state, because if you do, nothing's going to ever reset. And that's going to be a problem. So we'll keep that in there. And if I get further reports on the issue, then I'm sure I will. We'll take another look at it. It's like I said, it's just a spike that I'm hearing is happening when they first load in. So not a huge concern. So those that are not super familiar with prediction version 2, I'm just going to show you how it works. Just because I don't know how many people in here. I see we have we have a good number of people watching right now. I don't know if you've used the prediction system or not, version 1 or version 2, but version 1 basically didn't really use states so much. It only used states for the owning client and their object. Version 2 uses states for everybody. So that means you're running the exact same input that everybody else is, which turns out was significantly harder to program. A lot more things to run into that can go wrong, at least in the development process. But it is so much better because you're literally running the same exact code, so things are going. You don't have to really do any tricks. You don't have to write your code twice or anything like that. So let's go ahead and go to the demos, which for prediction version 2, honestly, they might not be 100%. They're still being worked on. But let's just start it up. So we got the server there. Let's just go to version 2, character controller. Bring this over here. Okay, and where's my other one? Right here. Yeah, here we go. Trying to get this over the snap. There we go. This is going to be embarrassing if this doesn't work right away. It's a possibility that it may not. All right. So here's my capsule. This is client-side prediction. So if I were to actually bring back up the server window and then go back to this. Oh, that's the other client. Where's my server window? Here we go. You can see it is indeed moving on the server as well. And if I try to cheat the player by, let's say, bumping up the jump force to 10, you can see it snaps back as it reconciles. So this is definitely server authoritative movement. Let's go to the second one here. Start it up. Client. All right. So we have 2 clients in, and I'm moving the right one, and you can see it's also moving on the left. Jumping looks exactly the same. This is this is exactly what we want. Now, here's what's kind of cool is, like I said, before it was using predicted object, which again, if you not use version 1, you're not familiar with what I'm saying, and that's fine. Predicted object would basically just, it is a little touchy, and I do see a little bit of iffiness in there, but I think it's because of my test settings. I'm certain it is. But yeah, anyway, version 1 is essentially just forwarded the position, velocity, and whatnot to the other players. And that means you lost a lot of inputs like jumping, if they were running, things like that. Stuff that you could use to maybe show animations, whatnot. But version 2, let's open this up. Of course, I opened in a new Visual Studio because it's a clone project. So let me drag that over here. It's actually a little bit simpler. This is a mess of code because, again, debug, like I said, it's the demos are really rough right now. All right, so one, this is something different too. You only have to call move once. You don't have to check if you're the server or if you're the client or if you're the owner or not to call move. Move is being your replicate, which in version 1 you had to check that. You would only call it if you were the owner, and that's it, or if you were the owner or server, I should say. Here you just call it once. And for the reconcile, same thing. You just call it after your data, or after your object has moved, or after the frame has been has been processed, and this will create a state for the object. So in the past, you don't even need the is server check. If you call this without the is server check as a client, it won't do anything. It's just you're pointlessly making the structure if you're not the server because the client doesn't send out reconciled data. So let me actually go to version 1 here and show you what that looks like. Okay, obviously this is more organized. You can't hold that against me. I just haven't organized it yet. So this is what version 1 looks like, and this is what version 2 looks like, and it's the same code. The difference here is, one, you can see things are doubled. The order matters very much as to what order you put it in. Version 2, it doesn't matter so much. And here I do the is server started check as well. If you don't have that check, things are going to end poorly for version 1 because the client shouldn't be trying to send reconciled data. But in version 2, you don't actually need this per se. Again, it just saves you performance. So another thing is this is the new method here. So it's a lot shorter. So we got move data, state, channel. Move data is being what you're passed in. That's basically your inputs. Replicate state, I'll cover that in a second. Channel is if you want to send on unreliable or reliable. 99% of the time you're going to use unreliable. The odds of packets dropping are pretty low to begin with. It's not really an issue in networks these days. But if you have something you absolutely must, like needs to go through, you can change it to reliable for that one call if you want. And version 1 offers that too. So you could say, let's say there was, I don't know, I can't think of any examples, but let's say there was something that you needed to go through or else it'd break the game no matter what, you could send it as reliable. So version 1, you have the as server, which indicates if this is running as a server or if as a client. You have, again, the channel, and you have if it's replaying or not. So replaying is essentially meaning that it's replaying previous states that you already run. Again, keep in mind, this is only run on the server and owner for version 1. On version 2, this is run for everybody. So you're using the exact same code base for version 2, and all the same actions are going through clients as they are the server. The state here is something new that's pretty handy. So let's say you got replicate state dot, and these are probably going to get renamed just slightly. So you have future, which is basically it means that you're predicting a future state on the client. to explain that, let's pull these up again. Let's close off this. Don't really need these open here. I'll just add a sphere. Where are you? All right. So let's say, let me put this as 2D because it might be easier to see. There we go. Perspective-wise, it's going to be easier to see. All right, so let's say that you are the client, and this is where the sphere is when you get a state from the server. The server says this is where it's at currently, and it's moving this way. All right, so the server says this is where it's at, but on the server, it's still moving. So let me just go ahead and make a new material here, just to make things a little bit easier to follow. We'll just make it green, because it doesn't really matter. Let me just put that over there. Okay, so white is client. This is the last state they received. And green is where it currently is on the server, because even though the server told the client this is where it's at, it's still moving on the server. It's still going. So by the time the client gets the message that it's here, it's actually here on the server. And that's normal. That's just how a lot of state systems work. That's how Fusion works. I don't know about coherence, but I'm going to assume that's how coherence works as well. A bunch of other ones that use state-like systems. It's not really a bad thing. That's just the nature of networking. I mean, you can't send packets in the future, hence the term future for the state. So let's say this is where the client, gets the sphere location or whatever. Let's just say this is where it's at whenever they receive certain input, but this is where it's at on the server by the time the client gets that. So if you see something that says state.future, so if the state is in the future, you are ultimately guesstimating ticks as they're occurring on the future, so or on the server. So let's just make another one here. Make yet a new material, because why not? Don't want to make things complicated. Well, I think I've already made things complicated, but a little bit easier to follow. All right. So let's say you get this state or whatever, but the client is still running the simulation. They're still going to tick every time the network goes, right? So every tick, you're going to get a future state in the replicate here. And if you want, you can choose to use the last information from the last move data or whatever data you want, and you can reapply it so that the object keeps moving ahead. And what that essentially does is it means that where the client sees it, if you choose to apply that information, that's where it's going to be pretty much on the server by the time the client responds to that input. So I know it's really, 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 really confusing. It might just be easier if I show you. So let's go to, and this is something that's new with prediction version 2 in a way. Well, I guess it is only available in version 2 because 1 doesn't really offer a way to do this. So let's go to the rigid body example. I'm going to go ahead and start this up. Just the server. And by the way, I don't know if you can see this, but you see how it snaps forward and back? That is a bug in version 4 that we're going to work on. I don't think it's prediction related. Things are spawning at default, so vector 3.0, and they shouldn't be. It's probably something really, really small. And I'll probably troubleshoot that too as well. All right, so here's my client. Moving on over. Making space for the next client. All right, I do have to modify the script because I think right now I'm doing a little bit of light prediction, just kind of a small amount of future prediction. Nope, I'm not. Okay. I am a little bit. Let me just uncomment this. So basically what I'm doing here is if the state is in the future, I'm just reducing velocity by 35%. So I'm keeping 65% of the velocity. And the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want to predict too far into the future. I still want to keep a little bit of a, in case they shift directions or something. Again, this is optional, depends on your game type, but whatever, you know. So let's see. Rigid body dot velocity equals vector 3.0. Let's do the same thing with angular velocity. So if you're using a rigid body and you want to cancel future prediction, this is all you do. You just zero out the velocity. If you're using a character controller, it doesn't carry velocity. You just exit the method earlier, so you would just need to return. But let me show you what this does. All right, so I'm gonna move this guy off the screen. It's not relevant. Going to the client here. All right, so you see how the client is crossing this threshold and it's still catching up on that side. This is what I was talking about, how I said it's in the past. You see how this side is much further behind? Now, is that necessarily a bad thing? No. The good thing about that is you can't really over predict where it's going. You can't predict wrong because you're waiting for states before you move. The downside is let's say, let me move this guy over, and I'm gonna start moving mine to the right. You won't be able to see it because of the scene tab, but I'm moving this one to the right. Now let's take this guy on the left here. He should be coming any second now. Move him into it. All right, so it looked really good, which is great, but there was an actual desync there. You didn't see it because it corrected it, but there was an actual desync there. Basically what happened is this guy here, the client I'm controlling on the right side, which is actually coming from the left, arrived later than expected, and because of that, the collision actually occurred later than expected. All right, so they just pass through each other. That's normal. It's a low tick rate. But let me show you what it does whenever you have the future prediction on. So I'm just going to uncomment this here. And like I said, I'm not keeping full velocity because that just increases your chance for a desync. I'm just keeping partial velocity. I'm going to move him over to the left and move this one on the right. If anyone's having a hard time tracking this, let me know. That's fine. All right, so I'm going to move the one on the right here, and you're going to see it on the left. All right, now watch what happens when he crosses this. You see how it was much closer than before when it crosses it? If you didn't quite catch that, if you're not 100% sure, I can just simply not alter the velocity at all, and you'll see that it'll get a lot closer. So again, I'm going to move this guy over to the left and start moving him. And now you can tell, because of that, it's way closer to where it is on this, and it's actually way closer to happening in real time, even though there's a good like 75 millisecond delay. So that's pretty cool, right? Even though there's a delay, it still is almost exactly the same. So what that means is whenever you are running stuff on your client, so now I'm going to be on the left side, I'm going to move over to the right. Whenever you're moving, you see how they hit at roughly the same time on both screens? You're basically closing the gap as to where objects are in space by predicting where they're going to be in the future. Like I said, this is mostly useful for rigid bodies, but it's super useful because you decrease the chance of a desync. Desyncs are going to happen no matter what when you're using rigid bodies. It's unavoidable, but you're decreasing the chance of it. And when they do occur, you're also decreasing the threshold or how much of a desync it is, which means the correction's probably going to be super smooth and maybe not even noticeable at all. Like that wasn't noticeable. So that's pretty cool. That's what the future prediction does. That's a whole new thing in version 2. And that's, I would say that kind of covers the gist of the changes, or at least the really cool stuff. It is a lot easier to use, though. I don't want to go into too much detail because this isn't really about that, but I wanted to show everybody what they had to look forward to. It's way better than version 1. And just, as I said, these are probably going to change, but I'm just going to cover them. Replayed. If the state is replayed, it just means it's replaying inputs. You reconcile and it's replaying inputs that have already run. That's the same thing as replaying being true here. And if you have user created, that means that the input which is coming through is for the current tick. It's not a replayed input. It's a new state, and it is confirmed as being actual data, like something that the user sent as input. And then you have predicted. This is the one that's going to get renamed because it's throwing people off a lot. People are thinking that predicted is the same thing as future. Understandably, that makes sense. I can see why that's confusing. So I'm going to rename predicted, but basically what that is the state. It's still on the current tick. It's not the future, but there was no input received from the client that owns this object, or the server of the server. There's no input received. It could have been latency, anything of that sort. So predicted is basically saying, okay, well, we were kind of hoping for data, but it didn't show up. And the odds of something coming through as predicted when the client actually sent data is not very likely, because version 2 actually has a new system for that. And this is another cool thing I guess I should have mentioned, but we're here now. So prediction version 2 has this new thing called queued inputs. And basically what that does is it will keep an internal buffer of inputs, and it's kind of like an interpolation on the network transform. It's pretty much the exact same thing. It tries to keep a buffer for that, so that if one does happen to come late or drops, you'll pick it up again during the resend, which is automatic and all that stuff, before you actually have to run that input. And that's all that is. So it just creates an all-around smoother experience. So yeah, there's a lot of things to look forward to in version 2 over version 1. I hope that helps. Yeah, let's see. Now, I really enjoy working with asset developers. I think it's great that we're seeing new assets come to Fishnet, and it's just nice to collaborate. Just in general too, like people that use Fishnet in general, you learn a lot of new things, you get a lot of new ideas. So with that said, let me open up something here, because I just like to open up a browser. I'm gonna have a window here. Fishnet, GitHub. I'm using Bing. Don't judge. It's just because this isn't my normal browser, so it doesn't have any of my toolbars and whatnot. Discussions. All right. So this is a developer. They've actually made a few things with Fishnet already, and they've made a lot of helpful contributions already. So they need share IDs to be exposed, because they're writing some kind of, I could be wrong, I hope I'm not wrong, but I talked to a lot of people, so I could be wrong, but I think they're writing an encryption thing using the intermediate layer of Fishnet, and some reason they need share IDs to be public. So that's not a big deal. That's just exposing something. So I'm going to go over to Server Manager. If you don't know what share IDs is, it's true by default. Basically, it lets you know who owns an object. So that way, I've talked about this before. It has an infinite number of uses, but let's say if you want to keep, this might be what they're using it for too, is let's say if you want to associate multiple objects together in your game world, you can get the owner of an object and know that they own all those objects. So super useful, and it doesn't do anything, doesn't give out any sensitive information. Okay, I want to say it's here. There we go. So they need this public. It is currently internal. I don't know why they didn't say if they needed it to be able to be set or not. But that's all I gotta do. I just need to make it public. It's just an accessor, so it's not a big deal. I'm gonna see where this is referenced in the code though. So let's see. All right, so if it's writing the owner of the object if share IDs is true, if share IDs is true, it's going to tell other clients who connected, etc. So if this was changed spontaneously at runtime, it could break things for sure because, well, it might not actually. Yeah, I mean, it could actually in this sense because when a client disconnects or reconnects and share IDs is true, the server tells that to other clients. Again, it's not anything sensitive. It's literally just a number um, that you can identify as a client. So again, infinite use is very useful. They needed it public, so it is now public. I was thinking about making it so you could set it at runtime too, but until I'm given a good reason as to why that has to be done, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and make that public for that developer because it most certainly has uses for them. And let me go over to my Git here. I'm going to discard this change. I'm going to keep the prediction manager change. That's where I did a test to make sure it wasn't reconciling too many. And this is the share IDs. So share IDs public limit replayed state / reconciles. By the way, I forgot to do a poll. Okay, now I'm going to push it up. Hopefully there's no conflicts. Great. Okay. You can access this repo here, but you have to be on the $10 tier. It has to be through GitHub. That's the only way I can offer it. I'm sorry for those on Patreon. This is why I'm trying to push people towards GitHub. I can only offer it on GitHub. That's just the limitations. But if some reason you want to access the developer repo, you can by being on that tier. Not many people need it. It's just kind of a nice perk to have for some that do. All right, so give me a second. Just gonna check some messages I've been receiving. Not a big deal. Partner telling me that our mailbox is open and that we have mail in it. She left for work, so she probably didn't have time to grab the mail and close it. Just let me know. Okay, so let's see what else we got. Let me close this out real quick on. Let's see, added in 4.0.7. Labels added. Okay, so let's see what else we got. Oh, this is another good one. What kind of? They want a specified channel to, or they want it so you can specify which channel to use when you're using buffer last, because some people are using unreliable as RPC. If you don't know what buffer last is, basically you can send an RPC and this will ensure that it goes to people that join after as well. That's all that is. They're basically saying they want an optional channel on there just for the buffer last feature because sometimes the unreliable ones were dropping. I did say that it doesn't happen very often, but it can happen that unreliable packets can drop. So they just want to toggle, but realistically, you probably always want it reliable when you're sending the packet to catch all the other clients up, because it's not going to be sending reliable every time you send the RPC. It's only going to be when it's syncing it up to late joining clients. So 100% makes sense that would be reliable by default. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. I don't know what that's under. I'm gonna say this. Whoops, not that one. This one maybe. There's a lot of code in this software, like crazy amounts of code. And it's I often forget where I put things because there's so much code. That's why I have my, like if I do this, network behavior dot, there's this many network behavior scripts They're just partial classes. It makes things a lot easier, but this one's for sync types, RPCs, RPC links, quality of life things that just makes things easier for you, basically, etc. Um, so this helps tremendously in making files smaller. They're not really compiled smaller because it all goes into the same spot in the end. But for readability and editing, it makes it easier. But also, I'm telling you this because this is something you might want to consider doing. It's really, really useful. Um, like, let's say I'm looking specifically for prediction related stuff. I just type in dot prediction, and then I have these three classes which are specific to prediction. So really useful, super, super useful. And all you got to do is you just got to go up to your class and just make it a partial class, and then you can do that. It's really easy to do, super handy. Highly recommend. All right, so buffered RPC. I can see I include the channel here, so I'm obviously sending it on a specific channel. Dumb, don't need it. As just talked about, it should always be reliable. All right, let's see. We got a question. I'm gonna read that question real quick. What sort of things can reconcile slash replays to not occur for version 1 if that's even supposed to happen? Well, version 1 doesn't run states for other clients. Other clients or server. You're basically just getting in version 1, you're just getting the position of the transform and if it's a rigid body, its velocities. And that's all you're doing. You're just applying the position and velocity. So it's almost like a network transform in a way. So it's not really even the same thing. I'm not sure I 100% understand the question, to be honest. Um, in version 2, you're getting the states, the actual states, inputs, and whatnot of the client. So it's going to play it exactly as they played it on their side, which again is perfect for animations and things because you can branch animations off from those states, visual effects, all kinds of cool stuff. All right, so 64-bit asked, and better examples, the official Ingo. Yeah, they do have. Okay, yeah, our examples suck. There's no denying that. They are complete garbage in comparison. I mean, there's some good ones in there, but overall, our examples suck. I'm not, The thing is our examples are intended to be showing use of certain functionality, whereas NGO examples are kind of just mini games made with NGO. Um, they don't really showcase anything specific that's beneficial, I suppose. They're more of like I said, more of like a showcase than they are example usage. Yeah, you could argue that's probably not true because you could look at the code and whatnot. I'm sure you could look at the code and learn things, but at the same time, if I want to know specifically how something works, I want the example to only cover that. And that's what ours try to target. Now, I'm not saying ours are superior in that way. I just said that ours suck, and they could definitely use work. It's just examples even take a good amount of time, and yeah, I know it's not a really good excuse. I know people often go to examples to begin with, so we'll try to get somebody on that. There's a chance that we're going to have more funding here in the near future. So I would be very open to hiring someone to make us some more examples. And yes, I could do it myself, but the problem is examples are a lot easier to make than prediction stuff. Not many people can actually work the internals of coding predictions. So that makes it a little bit difficult to assign that task to somebody. But yeah, we should be getting some new funding. That's what we're hoping for, fingers crossed. And we'll put some of that to see if anyone's available to make examples. Next question, also the new multiplayer mode. Fishnet does support that. Now we don't officially support that Unity version because it's not an LTS yet, but Fishnet does work with the new multiplayer mode already. All right, so let's see. This is where I'm sending the buffered RPC. This is where it's specifying the channel. So I'm just going to do byte channel.reliable. We're always going to send on reliable. We just talked about that. And this is where I generate the buffered RPC, and I'm passing in the channel. Don't need it. We're always sending reliable. We can just get rid of that field entirely. All right, that was an easy one. So let's go back to that. I'm going to copy this here, go to my other browser where I'm going to complete it. Added in 4.0.7. Labels added, closed with comment. All right, so that one's gone. Let's go back, refresh. Prediction version 2, generic types. Oh man, this person is asking for a lot. This is asking for a lot. The issue with, they basically want to be able to, I'd have to see examples as to why they want this, first of all, to see if maybe there's another way around it, but I don't know. The thing is with generic types is using CodeGen for generic types is a huge headache. It is such a headache. Trying to work that out by moving to some new technologies, but we can only really do so much until those said new technologies come out. Add diagrams to documentation. Instant syncing of sync type T. What? All right, let's read this suggestion. Was created before I knew RPC and sync types are both still sent. Okay. Oh. Okay. So what this person wants, oh, it's CaterLab. Okay. So what they want is they basically want a sync type to send immediately with the RPC, or in the order that it's set, basically. So right now, if you have an RPC and a sync type, let's say, and you set the sync type value, and then you call the RPC is going to send first, and the sync type sends at the end. That's just the nature of how sync types work. They're always going to send last because they're timed and they're not necessarily considered ordered. I understand why they want this, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. We're going to come back to these. We're going to go look at some potential issues, and boy, there's a good amount of them. Some of them are already resolved. But we're going to look at these because we want to get this new release out like ASAP. It's ready to go. Also, if any of these are relative to version 3, we're still supporting version 3 because it is, well, previously we called it release mode, but we renamed it to stable and beta to make things a little more clear. Let me show you that actually. All right. So if you're familiar with release mode or not release mode, let me open up a new project real quick on version 3. It's not available on version 4, so I can't show you what it does in version 4, but here's a little thing on the website. It basically says stable. These versions support enabling and disabling features still in development and are intended to be used for production. So if you're deploying your project, you want to stay on a stable release, most likely. If you're developing, we recommend using betas because they are typically stable. And while they have features that might not be stable, we usually limit that to those features specifically. And the reason we prefer people to use beta is because that gets us the quickest feedback. Things get solved quicker and things like that. So if everyone just stayed on stable while developing, and they didn't really have to, um, we might not get all the testing we need, and that could obviously lead to bugs we didn't know about and things like that. So we recommend using beta prior to readying for a release. It just works out better for everybody. Okay, that's probably a lie. It probably doesn't work out better for everybody per se, because if you update and suddenly stops working, that could be annoying. You could just roll back though, arguably. So basically what that means though is before it's called release mode, now it's called stable and beta. And when they're offered, you're going to see this button right here. And if I switch to release mode, which is going to say switch to stable in version 4, you can see this text here. It says release mode has been enabled. Please note that some experimental features may not function in release mode. This is what the stable versions offer, is this toggle. It basically disables anything experimental. So you can still be on like cutting edge technology for fishnet on the latest version and whatnot, getting all those updates that we know are solid while still being in production. So that's super useful. And then you can switch back to development mode, which will say switch to beta in the future. So that's what those are. And version 4 doesn't have that yet because it's not considered stable yet. It's in beta. But as I was saying, we are still supporting the stable mode inside version 3, and that's going to be true for a while. So even once version 4 goes stable, we're probably going to wait at least a month before we stop doing updates for version 3, at which point, if you're going to want updates, you're going to have to go to version 4. But the thing is, I say at least a month. What that means basically is that once version 4 hits stable, we're going to wait a month before we even consider stopping updates for version 3. And we're only going to stop those updates for version 3 if everything is smooth, like if everything is solid. If we have like reports trickling or things like that, we're going to still keep giving version 3 quote unquote long-term support updates, because that's all version 3 is right now, is it's just getting bug fixes. All the new stuff's coming in version 4. All right, so back to this. This was fixed. Let me mark that as fixed. That was a prediction version 2 bug, and that was fixed. So let me go ahead and just close that out. Fixed in 4.0.7 pre-release 02. Resolved. Pending release. Comment. So I'm going to refresh. You're going to see that now. Okay. Everything that's green here has been resolved, and we're just waiting on the release. That's why I want to get it out as quickly as possible. We got a question. Let me just check it out real quick. Oh, well, reconciles should happen pretty much all the time. I eat seagulls. That's gross. They're filthy. But reconcile should occur fairly regularly as long as data is changing on the server. So if you're not getting reconciles, you're probably hitting something I showed you earlier. Well, if you were around when I showed it anyway. I'm not going to jump back to it just yet, but basically, if your client is having some issues with frame rate or massive latency spikes, it's going to skip reconciles. It's going to limit it to 3 per second, and that's because we don't want to potentially tear apart whatever's going on anymore, because that latency or frame rate loss could be because you're having a performance hit, and we don't want to contribute to that. But again, keep in mind that's up to 3 per second, and that's under those conditions. You're not going to stop getting them automatically. You're just going to, or entirely, I should say, you're just going to get them less frequently. And that's only if things are going really, really bad. So it shouldn't be something you should see often. But if that is why you're not getting certain reconciles or replays, then that's not changing, because if we leave that in, that's just going to cause your application to basically freeze, and nobody wants that. Um, Again, version 1 is different in that you only replay your own inputs. You don't necessarily need to replay inputs um, if nothing went wrong, if nothing desynced. So let's just pretend that for whatever reason you are dropping reconciles because your machine is a hot mess, quite literally. It's probably melting at this point. Um, then, yeah, you might not correct from desyncs that occurred at that specific time, but when you get reconciles in the futures or later on and they are processed, it will correct itself. So whatever desync happens, it should be very temporary. Um, it shouldn't break the game or states overall. All right. CSP is the same thing. They're the same uh, system. So in version 1, it used a component called predicted object. In version 2, it doesn't use that anymore. It's more streamlined. It's a lot easier to work with. Version 2 is so much easier to work with than version 1. I wouldn't even start with version 1 at this point, just because after the 407 release, which is coming very, very soon in a matter of days, version 2 is solid, or at least significantly better, and it's going to be easier to use and all that good stuff. Yeah, that's normal. If it occurs in really, really high latency, it will drop a few. That's intentional. Okay, so this is one that was reported by one of our helpers, and it was reported in 406, which is the current public release. They were very kindly, kindly supplied a example project, or an example project is great for me. Makes me find things so much quicker when I have these little example projects, because I can just hop in. Usually it's just maybe a few dozen lines of code. I don't have to dig through a bunch of other logic that doesn't really need to be there, and I can figure it out. Now this was reported by Max, and Max is really, really, really good. So this is almost definitely a bug, and just by the sounds of it, it sounds like it's a bug. Let me just read it real quick. Projectiles are updated on the server side and have position synced by the bullet hits an object and the bullet is despawned. Now, I don't know if it's despawning on client or server. So if client just straight up destroys the object before server says to destroy it, you will still get packets from the server probably saying, or maybe anyway, saying, okay, here's an update for the object. This is another position update as it occurred on the server before it was destroyed. You might still get that update, but it should not be a null reference exception like this. So this is almost definitely a bug. I can see that it's in my code. It's in the network transform. So I'm going to go ahead and label this as a bug, and I'll probably take a look at this off camera. The reason I'm not going to do it on camera is because I haven't looked at this project. I don't know what's in there. I don't want to open up something that, I'm not saying Max would do this or anyone would do this intentionally, but who knows? There might be something in there that shouldn't be on YouTube, and I don't know. So I'm not going to open that up right now, but I will investigate that either probably today, honestly. All right, so let's see. Multiple network managers destroy oldest. Use multipass with tugboat and I don't have fish unity transport. Online scene and disconnect and load back to the menu to see nothing bad happens. Load with tugboat to online scene. Okay. They did post a chat thing, but which is good. That's a part of the requirements. You have to post a chat where you troubleshoot the issue first, just to make sure it wasn't user error. Plus, it gives me more insight as to like what was already tried. It helps a lot too. So I'm gonna take this one and put a comment here. Can this be replicated perhaps with Tugboat / Yak instead of Tugboat and FUT for fishy Unity transport? And comment, I add a label that says acknowledged, basically saying that I have read their issue. I added the label that said acknowledged, where are you? There we go. Took a while to refresh. Acknowledged basically says, yeah, I saw it, I read it. It's something I'll look into. All right, multi-interface. Okay, so this is just a limitation of lightnetlib. We actually have a few pull requests open to fix that. Thanks to them for doing the work. Again, makes my life easier. So I'm going to mark this as I guess this is kind of a bug. It's pretty minor, but I'll mark it as a bug, and then I'll mark it as result pending release. And in my comments, I'm going to put, again, I know you can't see this. It's on my other browser. We'll update this via PRs and version 4.0.7 comment. And now it's marked there. This is new. My client can't connect to the host and run normally the first time, however, or can connect to host, sorry, and run normally the first time. However, if the client disconnects and tries to reconnect, it gets the following message. Connection 1 does not exist. What does that say? Data will not be sent. Oh, -1 does not exist. All right, so this appears to be coming from they didn't highlight the stack trace on the error, so I can't really do much with that. I prefer stack trace to be in text. Stack trace is this block of code you see here telling you where it originated, basically showing what happened along the way. And they posted a screenshot, which whatever. I prefer text, but oh, they did a bunch of screenshots. Okay. I might need to put something in there about not posting code as screenshots. Okay, so that's normal. It's a very normal error when you lose connection. Okay, so I can't really do anything about this. Plus, they didn't troubleshoot it. So this is what I mean when I say that. This is why I said that we need to have the link whenever you make a new issue. There's a template that whenever you file a new issue, let me pull it up real quick. I don't know if it's going to let me show this on this side because I'm not logged in. Yeah. All right. So basically, whenever you try to make a new issue, you're going to see this. What does this say? Important. If general, description, and replication are not completed, the issue will be closed immediately. Unity version, Fishnet version, Discord link. There's no Discord link in this. I applaud them for doing everything else. Maybe they can't use Discord. That's fine. I understand that sometimes people can't use Discord, but there's not enough information for me here to actually troubleshoot. So I'm going to have to close this out, unfortunately. We don't keep these open until we have all the information we actually need to troubleshoot, or if they provided all the information they could at the time. So let's go ahead and bring that up real quick. Go back. Oh, yeah. All right. So I actually have two. Yeah. All right. Give me 1 second here. Let's just move this over. Okay, so I'm not going to close this out right away because I'm assuming they can't use Discord, but they can specify either way. So I'm going to change this to acknowledged and missing information. That missing information basically tells me, hey, I need to, or the other person needs to respond, and I am waiting for them to respond. Whenever I see that yellow missing information, I don't look at this until I get another response. So if you file a ticket and you see this, that means I'm awaiting something from you. It's probably not going to go anywhere, and if I don't get that information in like a month, I'm probably closing it out, trying to keep things tidy and clean, whatnot. Um, uh, that I'm not going to touch right now. Error and debug manager. This is set as a low priority. I'll probably resolve that one in 407 too. It's pretty minor. As well, the latest version 3. Okay. I think what they're saying, let me read it first. So parent object is v3.1. Child object is a random scale that's getting moved. That's the graphical object, I guess. A child object of the child object is v3.1. Oh wait, this is a graphical object. This is confusing. Working fine. Any newer? Okay, well, I think I'm gonna need an example project on this one. Let me just do that real quick. Can you please provide a small example project? Comment. Okay. Oops. Refresh. That's the one I just did. I don't think I'm going to be able to troubleshoot. I mean, I can follow the steps. It's not that hard, but sometimes when you get weird situations like this, like really, really weird differences, there could be something slightly different than how they configure it versus how I configure it, even when I follow the steps. So that's why I like to use the example projects. This was fixed. This was already fixed. So this one I can mark as completed. Acknowledged, resolved, pending release, resolved, and 4.0.7. This was actually resolved in a pre-release, so I can just put that. Okay. Let's see. Unconsumed gold data queue. By the way, I'm probably gonna wrap it up once I get done reviewing these. I'm going to look at the most important ones. I think is this one or version 3.1 as well? No, this is only a version 4.1, but I'm still probably gonna look at that before I release 407. I could have sworn I set that as, I'm gonna set that one as needing more information because I don't have Unity transport set up. Where did that just go? I just lost it on my other screen. Here we go. I'm gonna mark that as missing information. There we go. That's been resolved. That's just a weird one. This one I'm getting to, that one I can't handle right now because that's an enhancement. This one is tricky. This is probably a bug, but that is super tricky. Depending on the condition, it might just be the way it has to be. This is a bug. Unfortunately, that is going to stay as a low priority for now. And this one I apparently need to investigate. So I think that's pretty much it. This is something that's going to be addressed in version 4. It's an error that pops up whenever you try to connect, specifying a port with multipass or something of that sort using set port. Harmless error. It does print as an error, but it's not actually doing anything. It's kind of just an exception saying, hey, you being me, you missed something in the code. This is a condition you didn't cover. So it's not necessarily something that's breaking anything. It's just an error there that I put, implying that I should have done something to handle the condition, even though the condition is not really breaking anything. It's just a way so we don't have unexpected behavior ultimately. It's so we can catch stuff. So yeah, we don't really have that many things to look at. I think maybe 3 bug reports here that I'm going, maybe 2 or 3 that I'm going to resolve before the next 407 and or version 4 and version 3 release. I can't really think of anything else at this time to show you. I mostly wanted to give you a little bit of insight onto the new Prediction version 2 because it is so much better. It's awesome. If you're using Prediction already, you're going to love version 2. Any questions before I go? There will be a release soon for version 2 or more time. Version 2 is currently experimental right now. Sorry, when I say version 2, let me start over. Prediction V2, aka Prediction version 2, is currently experimental in version 4, and it's going to stay experimental for a while, but it doesn't mean it's not going to get updates or anything like that. We actually have pre-releases on Discord for supporters, and right now we are on version 407 of Fishnet pre-release 2, which has, as far as I know, has Prediction version 2 as stable. When I say as stable, I mean there's not been any reported issues. It's still considered an experimental feature, but there's no known issues currently. So going back to your question, will version 2 be released soon? Yeah, well, like I said, it's going to be released as experimental, but the next official public release of 407 is going to have what we believe to be a very stable version of it, and stable and usable. So yeah, you can expect it in like I mean, I don't want to make promises, especially with times, because I'm really bad sometimes about making deadlines, especially depending what comes up. But I really want to have a release out before this Saturday, I'd say. I'd like to get it out probably tomorrow, but yeah, like I said, it's pretty much ready. There's no known issues. The only reason it's not going to be released is if something breaking pops up before unexpectedly in that time, and I just need to do another pre-release test on it. But otherwise, yes, it's going to be out. Will it have better CPU performance? Good question. Probably not. Because before, well, you say CPU, and I want to be very explicit. I'm talking about CPU, not bandwidth right now. Um, Probably not, because on version 1, all you had to do was put on the predicted object component, which again just synchronized position and rigid body velocities if they existed. And that was ultimately it. And you would use a network transform too, potentially, if you weren't using rigid bodies. Um, so in version 2, you're actually running states. You're not just getting position and velocities, you're running actual inputs, which means iterating through all that logic and whatnot. That might sound terrible. Like, you're like, why would you not want the better performing option? Well, because in version 1, all you get is the position and velocities, and you don't get anything else. Meaning, you're not going to run the inputs, so you're not going to necessarily know if the player is crouching. You're not going to know if they're shooting, if they're sprinting. You're not going to have any of those states at all whatsoever on version 1 unless you explicitly send them separately in RPCs. And that might even, sending those explicitly might actually be more work than just running the states like they are in version 2. So let's say presumably you're not setting any states like that, or you're not needing any of that extra information about what the player is currently doing or whatever. You don't need to run the inputs. Um, Version 2 would be more expensive in the sense that it's running inputs instead of just getting the position and velocities. But there's a very big but here. In version 2, there's also going to be an option to simply behave like version 1, where you don't run the states of other clients and everything is just synchronized via network transform. Um, I actually just forgot about that, and you just reminded me of it. Um, so in that sense, if you are not needing all those extra states and inputs and whatnot, and you do just need to have the position, rotation scale, etc., all that synchronized, then yes, version 2 will actually be more performant in that sense. But if you need those states and whatnot, like you need the inputs run, well, one, you can have those in version 2 where you couldn't in version 1. It's not even something version 1 can do, which is a bit of an unfortunate limitation, which is why we made version 2. But running that code logic might take a little more CPU, but it's really hard to say if it's going to cost more or not. It's probably going to be similar. It might cost a tiny bit more, but I don't know for sure. It's not something I've really benchmarked, and I don't think it'd be significant enough to matter, but it could slightly. Tutorials on lobby and matchmaking. Yeah, you've reached the end of it, Sonic. I'm sorry. I was just taking questions at the moment. Um, there's let me just check something real quick before I answer. First of all, there's a lot of tutorials on YouTube, especially I know Bobsy makes some pretty good ones, BOBSI. Let me see if we have any on our official documentation. Again, those need to be updated really. Like they need, we need more examples. It's such a sidetrack of work from myself too. So I'm gonna try and get somebody else to do those. I don't think I see one on our documentation specifically for lobbies and matchmaking, but I am certain that they exist on YouTube. I know they do exist on YouTube. I've seen a couple. But ultimately, it's not really that different from any other framework. So, like for example, if you want to use PlayFab or I don't know what other services you might use, but or EOS, Epic Online Services, it's going to be the setup's going to be exactly the same because you're not so much dependent on the framework as you are. Sorry, when I say you're not so much dependent on the networking solution as you are whatever matchmaking system you're using. Um, Now we do have the pro project called Lobbying Worlds, which basically lets you can find a video for that on my YouTube as well. Or you can actually find it on, let me show you here. Let me get the address. This might not be what you need. This is just something I want. That's not what I wanted to search for. I just accidentally pasted the letter O. Let's see, general. Where is that? I think I renamed it. I don't know where it's at now. Here we go. So pro projects, you get this if you're a pro member, which basically means it lets you run multiple games on a single server. There's a lobby system to where people can connect, choose a name, kick players, etc. It's kind of a demo project. It's not necessarily intended to be like a one size fits all, but it is absolutely usable. Like this lobbying world is something you might see used in a game like I should know this title. I don't play it. I hated the game, but it's one where everyone's like sus. I can't remember the name of it. Totally blanking on it. The one in space where you jettison people out the airlock. But yeah, you could totally use this project here for something like that. But if you want more matchmaking across different servers and whatnot, we have support for pretty much every system you can think of. I know Unity has their own. We support that. We support PlayFab. We support EOS. We support Steam. There's a ton of them that we support, and using them is really more of knowing how to use their add-on than it is using the networking solution Unity, or sorry, Fish networking. You just implement their software, and it just kind of it's not really dependent on what networking solution you use. Among Us, yeah, that one. Whale documentation, be switched to version 4 soon. I didn't want to switch it until after version 4 hit, until it hit stable, but I do have some articles specific to version 4, and they're just in a subsection. As far as changing over the full documentation, that's hard to say. So that's hard to say, but most of it's already in here though. Like 3 and 4 is how you use sync vars, and we already have a guide for both of them. Prediction 2 has a pseudo guide. It's kind of, it might be outdated right now. Let's see, where is that? Where is that? Where is it? Here we go. See, version 2 has a guide. I think it might be slightly outdated though, but I'll be updating that for sure. But yeah, we probably won't be moving it all over until it hits stable. But realistically, the only things that are changing is, of course, we're adding version 2, which is different, completely different from version 1. Version 2 is not going to at all affect version 1. You can do one or the other. So there's like a toggle to turn on one or the other, but they don't affect each other. So these are both going to be staying in here. Sync vars, however, of course, are completely different in version 4. And the only other things that might be different is some of the inspectors. Like, for example, this is new. A lot of these are new in version 4. The is spawnable, that's new. Enable prediction, that's new in version 4. So that's something else I probably have to do. But more or less, it's pretty much the same. We try to keep things consistent so that when you do update between major versions, it's not a whole lot of work. All right, let's see what else we got for questions. Is an engine agnostic / modular version still a plan? Yeah, it's still a plan. It is. We're waiting on certain things. We want to implement technologies that we have available that will be needed for the modular versions gradually. Things that won't affect users at all. There are some technologies we're waiting on that just simply are not released yet, and there's other changes we'll have to make which might be big enough to where it could. I don't know, honestly. Again, this is all stuff we haven't really fully been able to evaluate because not everything we need is in front of us right now. But yeah, we are still planning it. But if we do it, it's going to have to be a different fishnet in a way. So what I mean by that is, let's say, let me just show you, for example. We got our network transform component, right? Everybody knows what that is. You just drop the component on, and it synchronizes your, position, etc., whatnot. So network transform inherits directly from network behavior, which inherits from mono behavior, which is, of course, the Unity component. So to be modular, we can't have that dependency. So we're going to have to make things basically their own classes, independent of any engine. And then when we do that, we're going to get errors, of course, because things are going to be missing, like update, etc., whatnot. So that's going to be a problem. I don't know why it says no issues. Oh, it's because I modified a different file, not. Yeah. But anyway, we need to be dependent upon certain things for certain engines, and we're going to have to build like a bridge. And things like network transform aren't going to inherit from. They'll probably still inherit from network behavior, but network behavior won't inherit from mono behavior. And to do that, it's not really a big deal to do that. The main thing is that by inheriting from mono behavior, we get things like this, where we can serialize fields and whatnot. Running update, late update, etc., not a big deal. That's nothing at all. The main problem is that we're going to lose access to this, and we're going to have to somehow feed this information into the new network transform class that doesn't require Unity. Yeah, we could just set settings using, on a wake inside a Unity script. Like, for example, let's say if we did make this change, right? What would happen is it would probably look something like this: private network transform. We'll just say agnostic, because why not? This would probably be public so users could access it. But what we'd be looking at is something like this, where these wouldn't exist, and all we're going to keep is just serialized stuff. That's a lot of stuff, so we're just going to pretend that the cutoff is here. Delete all this. All right, so we're going to pretend that this is essentially the bridge for Unity, and this is the actual network transform logic. So the bridge for Unity might look something like this: private void update, and we're going to do network transform z dot update, and this is just a method exposed in the class, not actually the Unity override. That's something like we would do. We probably have to do something like private void awake, and then we're going to have to do network transform z dot initialize once, or whatever wording we're using. We're going to have to pass in all of these things. So that's definitely doable. Downside to this is it's going to be a small performance hit, because you're actually calling a whole new method instead of just running it inline here. Not a big hit, but definitely a small hit of some sort. The downside is also we need to keep the bridges what's exposed for properties in sync with whatever is actually needed by the component. So that could get annoying to say the least. Because when we do make this change, or when we do go this direction eventually, like I said, I want to make it as user friendly as possible, so users don't really have to do a whole lot of work. Um, but also make it friendly for everybody working on Fishnet itself. Because if I am copying logic from here to calling the class and everything, that's just more code to manage. I would like to have it so that I could instead have all these serialized fields just show up inside um, the inspector without having to have actual separate serialized fields. So what I mean is basically, like, let's say I have network transform Z or agnostic or whatever, and that has public properties. I would like those public properties to show up in the inspector automatically, so I don't have to make separate ones for Unity specifically. But if I did that, I can almost guarantee you. Oh, it's compiling. I did things. Okay, give it a second. Uh-oh. Did I break any? No. If I did that, almost definitely all of these are going to be nested under like a drop-down, because there's going to be the network transform agnostic class, and it's going to drop down and you're going to see all these settings. That might not be the end of the world, except if I do that, you're going to lose all of your serialized values because it's technically under a different class. So you can see why it gets complicated pretty quick. I know some other frameworks have made their own versions of whatever for Godot, etc., Unreal. They're going to get abandoned. I'm telling you right now, they're going to abandon them. There's no way they have time, because they're completely different, like, source codes. My goal is to basically use one source code and make it work across all of the engines by just using quote unquote bridges to make it simple. They have entirely different source codes. There's no way they're going to be able to maintain that. Example. Nope, not going to say it. I had something bad to say about Mara, but I'm not going to say it. Okay, so let's go to the next question. Let's see. Host migration is probably not possible. In order for a host migration to work, you're going to have to have a client ultimately act as a server at the same time. Kind of like, yeah, obviously client host, but it's not in the same sense. When I say that, I mean still have a separate server manager and client manager like it is now, but at some point the client is going to have to assume being the server manager, even though they're not actually the server manager or the server itself. So that would require a massive overhaul internally, and there's absolutely no plan to put that into Fishnet right now or the foreseeable future. It's so much work, and realistically, dedicated servers are cheap, like super cheap. Unless your game blows up, then you're making loads of money. Who cares? So there's no plans for it, and you can still do client hosted stuff, just not host migration. So no plans. I wouldn't even consider it at all whatsoever right now. Without version 3, things like attributes aren't used anymore. You mean on the sync vars? You said, I assume you're talking about the sync var attributes. I know there's a delay in the voice, so I'm gonna have to wait until they hear me. You're talking about sync vars while I wait, but we don't use the sync type attributes in general, being sync object or sync var. Yes, okay, because we took that out of CodeGen. So basically, I can actually use the documentation for this one. So before we had sync bars like this, and then you could specify what channel you want it on. If you wanted to call back on a certain method, there's a couple other ones like read permissions and things like that. And a new one, you don't need those because that was handled by CodeGen. Basically, CodeGen would read the values you're setting in this when scripts are being compiled, and CodeGen is very low level. The less we can do with it, the better. And then it would just implement content based on what you put here. However, with version 4, you can do the same thing. You just don't need the attributes anymore. So here's an example. So you can do, here's a sync var float, and we're specifying a new setting of interval of 1f. That's a new sync type settings. And the first parameter, if you only use one, is the interval. There's other ones, like, for example, we get asked, how do you set initial values? You can also pass in an initial value here if you want. So that's not any different. And let me see here. Yeah, so here's a more complex example to where you can specify a sync type settings like write permission, read permission, etc. And you can access all of them. They're all there. And it's just done in the constructor instead of using attribute, which is less CodeGen work. And also, this opens up new features as well. One, you can actually cache sync type settings. Like, let's say if you wanted to use a certain sync type setting for all of your sync bars for the class or project or whatever, now that were, not the defaults. So if that were the case with version 3 or Fishnet version 3 of sync bars, you'd have to specify all of those details in every single sync var attribute. In version 4, you could just make a sync type setting, make it static or something if you wanted, and then you could just pass that in the constructor, and it has all those settings for you. That's one benefit, so that's a lot easier to do now. And another benefit is you can actually change these settings at runtime now. So let's say if there's a sync bar and you want only the owner to get the results for whatever reason, you want only the owner to have updates, you can have read permissions to owner only instead of, this says exclude owner, but it's documentation, obviously. You can have it to read permissions as owner only, and then suddenly you want everybody to have the value. I've actually seen this asked before. I don't remember the exact situation. You could change the read permissions from owner only to observers, which is basically everyone that can see the object, at runtime. You can change the interval at runtime. You can change write permissions. You can change everything at runtime now. You couldn't do that before because with CodeGen, it was basically coded into the file. You couldn't see it. It was there. It was hard coded into the file as it was generated. But with this, you can actually change them at runtime. So there's way more flexibility on top of that. All right, so any more questions? Questions. Okay, someone actually commented on Discord about something. Related to the stream. I don't know exactly what they linked. Somebody is watching the stream and they sent me a message that said, it looks like it's Fishy Steam related. I think they meant stream. I'm not sure. But not much info there either. And then they said buffer last issue. I hate how Discord does not highlight, like when you click a message link and it like teleports you to another channel or server or whatever. I hate how it does not highlight what that message is. So it just brings you to a giant wall of text and you have to like figure out which one it is. So annoying. I don't know which one he's referring to. Oh. Okay. Someone's getting error. I think it's this one, this message. It says, I use Fishy Steamworks. I'm reading from my Discord. I use Fishy Steamworks to create a client server, and then I used another client to connect. But I get an error connection ID -1 does not exist. Data will not be sent. And then the client will receive the message, connection closed by peer. Okay, so that's from November. That's probably what it is. Interesting. I will message them on my Discord after this and see if they have any more information on it. Even though it's old, hopefully there's, yeah, they either figured it out or have more information for me. Okay, reading questions. Okay, that seems better. Will there also be a mirror to version 4? Do you mean like are my projects being upgraded to version 4? When I say projects, I mean these guys right here. Is that what you mean when you say mirror to version 4? Hey, how's it going? Also, it's no problem at all. It's actually nice to do these every so often because, like I said, I really enjoy feedback. It really does. Like I'm not just blowing smoke. Getting feedback really does help significantly with the development of Fishnet. Um, when I first released Fishnet, it it already had more features than any other free product on the market at that time. And since that time, I think we've added easily 200 or so new features or improvements that were entirely suggested by the community. So, yeah, we take feedback um, very seriously. We really like feedback. It's important that you listen to your user base. Obviously, listening to our user base helps make the product better, um, makes it more reliable, and helps the product grow for managers of said project, myself and other people who contribute to it, as well people that use it. So, love feedback. That's another reason why I said I like working with asset developers as well because they usually need access to internal stuff, and I don't always know what that is. And sometimes they're just like, "Well, I'm just gonna make this public for my asset," which we don't want because if it's not public in the source, the next time someone updates, it's going to break their asset. And when I say updates, I mean if they update Fishnet, which they're probably going to do. That's why we tell developers like, hey, or sorry, asset developers like, hey, if you need something exposed or you need a feature to make your thing work, let us know. More often than not, if there's not a way to already do it, we're gonna put it in. We want this to work for everybody. All right, so let's see. One thing I'd suggest is have a script that restarts the server. You mean like if something that like stops the server then restarts it? Hey, 64-bit can the converter you did follow up. Okay. Um no, I mean the converter doesn't actually affect or doesn't modify sync bars to begin with. It just basically it doesn't touch your code at all. The upgrade converter just replaces their components with our components, and nothing has changed that would require that to be altered to go to version 4. The only major difference, like I said, the only major difference in version 4 is the sync bars. There's a couple of other things here and there which are pretty minor. You probably already noticed, but I'm going to point this out because this is extremely beneficial. On our documentation here, we have changelog, which redirects to the releases page because managing multiple changelogs turned out to be a giant pain and a headache, and among other things. And all the changes are on our releases page, so we just do it there. But we also have break solutions, which will tell you explicitly how to upgrade from each version. So if you're going, this is obviously the first version of 4, or sorry, this is the first version of 4. So if you're going from any version 3 to version 4, these are errors you might encounter, and this is how you fix them. And we have that for literally every single change. Now the thing is we, like I said, we try to keep these breaks very minimal, and this looks like a lot of stuff. I mean, we did change a lot of stuff, but 99% of this, obviously I'm making that number up, but a very large percentage of this are things that very few people actually use. It's more like low-level stuff that exists in FishNet if you need it. So people do use it, but it's not going to affect the majority of people. But if you ever do run into an error after updating, compile errors or whatever, all you gotta do is just hop over here, just look for the error, and it tells you how to fix it. It's usually pretty straightforward. You changing the broadcast method signature. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that one. Um, that's because, yeah, I wanted to do that for a while, and I was kicking myself for not doing it in the first place. Uh, Previously, broadcast, you didn't know what channel data was arriving on. You didn't know if it was unreliable or reliable. And um, sometimes that could be useful. Maybe no one was using it because no one suggested putting that in there. But I wanted that to be known. Example, the network transform has eventual consistency. It uses the unreliable channel to send data, and this is just better for not clogging the network. It's less packet header size, among other things. But the eventual consistency when a network transform is finally like, okay, this is where you should be caught up to. If not, something's wrong. That sends on the reliable channel. That's the only time network transform sent on the reliable channel. So I know that when something comes by unreliable, it is the ultimate end state of that network transform, and I don't have to do any extrapolation or anything like that. That's just one example, but it could be any number of things. And knowing what channel something came in on for broadcast was not present in version 3. And I realized very shortly after making version 3 stable, which was pretty early on in its life, I guess, that I should have made that. I should have included that. So that's why I did it in version 4. That's another thing too. We don't do breaks like that except between major versions like 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we don't do breaks no more frequent than like 6 months. I think it took about a year until we went from 3 to 4, and we're still supporting 3. So we try to keep things pretty reliable for developers, and so they don't expect any, so there's no surprises and whatnot. All right. Again, any questions? Probably gonna give it like a minute. And if there's no more questions, I will be logging off here. These streams always go longer than I intend. Like, I thought I was only gonna be on this for maybe like an hour, a little over, and it says 2 hours and 37 minutes. I don't know if that's right. Well, yeah, that is right actually, because we started at 11. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't think there's any more questions right now. I am going to take a break. It is just about 1 p.m. here. So I'm probably gonna go have some lunch. I made some homemade chili. Uh, Fun fact, and maybe I don't know, maybe it was just me, but if you make beans from like raw beans, like hard, harvested beans, not actual like canned stuff. First of all, the instructions said you could either soak them in water overnight, or you could boil them for 2 minutes and then let them sit in the water for an hour after, to make the beans soft and whatnot. That was not enough. It took, I had to simmer those beans for like 4 or 5 hours before they're actually the right inner consistency. Had the same issue. So either we're complete idiots when it comes to cooking, or those instructions are just wrong. So if you're, maybe this is common sense, and Americans just don't know how to cook because I'm an American. Maybe that's it. I don't know, but yeah, that was annoying. But it's good now. The beans are good now. The chili's good. I'm gonna go enjoy some of that. So thanks for everybody that stopped in, asked questions, watch all that good stuff. And if you have any other questions, I'll be on Discord in probably like an hour or so working on the next Fishnet release. But yeah, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.